And then by the time we finish, Exodus, we have 2 more weeks in Exodus, we will know them all. Okay, good. Now, let's begin our lesson today. We're studying Exodus 7 through chapter 14 today. And we've already read it through. And today we're going to be talking about 3 main areas. The plagues that you read about. We'll talk about the Passover, and then God's plan of deliverance. So the plagues, the Passover, and the deliverance. Now, before we get into it, let's just talk for just a second about the background on the religion of Egypt. You notice as you went through this, it's important to know a little bit about what the Egyptians believed. And you notice that the Egyptians are polytheists. That means they had many gods. They worship, we know, at least of 80 gods, and they could have had more. It's hard to know exactly about the Egyptian religion because it wasn't a uniform written down religion, but it was rather the conglomeration of many local religions put together. We also know, though, that the Pharaoh was himself seen as a god. He was seen as the offspring of deity, and so he was a god. So as we go through these chapters today, as we talked about last week, God's purpose in the plagues, God's purpose in what he brought upon the Egyptians is so that they will know that I am the Lord. In Exodus 12:12, God says, I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. And as we go through the plague, God is bringing judgment on the different gods that they worshiped. For example, number 1 is for the Nile, which of course was Egypt was the Nile. The Nile was Egypt, and they worshipped the god. We'll get into that in just a little bit more. But as we go through, I want you to see, as we go through these plagues, that this is God's amazing way of bringing together these 70 hungry men that he brought to Egypt 400 years before. And he has put them through the furnace. He has melded them together as a people through their suffering. And he is getting ready to make them into his own special people, a nation of his special people. And he's setting them on the world stage in such a way that God's name would be proclaimed throughout the earth. Because Egypt was the greatest nation on earth. And then he's doing it in such a way that Israel would be recognized as God's people. So God wants the world to know that he alone is God and that these are my people. I will be working through them to bless the entire world. And so that's what, as we see the going through the plagues, that is the end result of them. That my name might be proclaimed throughout all the earth, so that then they will know that I am the Lord. I want you to listen as I just read to you some verses that show us this. In 5:1, Exodus 5:1, it says, this is what God, the Lord, the God of Israel says, let my people go so that they may hold a festival to me in the desert. Because Moses was saying that to Pharaoh. And this is Pharaoh's reply. Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. That's where we start. That's where our story starts. God says, let my people go. Pharaoh says, are you kidding? I don't know who God is. And I'm not going to let these people go. And so God says, oh, you just wait. You will know who I am. So listen, in 6:6, therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I am the Lord. See what God is saying? He wants his own people to know. He wants the world to know. Then listen to this in 7:8. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. Chapter 9, verses 14 and 16. And I'm skipping part. So that you may know that there is no one like me in all the earth. But I have raised you up for this very purpose, that I may show my power, and that my name might be proclaimed throughout all the earth. God's purpose, he wants his people to know and trust him, and Moses as their leader. And he wants the nations to know he alone is God. Why? 2 Peter 3:9 tells us, God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. Never forget that. 2 Peter 3:9. God doesn't want anyone to perish. He wants everyone to be saved, but just to be saved, they have to believe. And to believe, they have to know him. And so at this point, when the world as a whole has turned against God, God says, I will show you that I am the Lord. You will know when we finish these plagues that I alone am God. So he brings judgment on all the gods of Egypt to show them who their gods are, how worthless their gods are. He alone is God. He wants everyone to know that, ladies. He wants us to know that. He wants our children to know that. He wants our families to know that. He wants our friends to know that. He wants our neighborhood to know that. He wants the world to know that he is the Lord, so that they don't perish without him. You see God's heart in all of this? His heart is not just to bring judgment and to punish for sin. His heart is to let people know he's God, so that they can come to know him, so that they can be forgiven. That's the heart of God as we go into the place. So we don't have a lot of time. Remember that this is a survey course. In other words, it's a big picture course. We can't get into all the details because we have 40 chapters and only 4 weeks. So there are other courses where you get into much more detail than we can get into. And I hope that you will do that, because it's fascinating to see and understand the details. But we're only doing the big picture, or else we would be here day and night before I know you don't want that. Okay, now, as you remember, as Moses went, remember Moses, of course, said, who am I? How can I go to Pharaoh? And God gave him some signs. And the first of those signs was that Moses had a staff in his hand, because he'd been a shepherd in the wilderness. And so God asked him to throw his staff down. When he did, it became a snake. He picked it up again, and it returned to a staff. So God said, when you go to Pharaoh, show him that sign. So Moses did what God told him to do. He went to Pharaoh, and he showed him the sign. He threw the staff down and became a snake. But Pharaoh called in his wise men and magicians, and they could do the same thing. They threw their staffs down, and they became snakes. Aha, but here it is. Moses' staff swallowed up their staffs. Whose God was superior? Then they will know that I am the Lord. Now, let me just say that right here, we will see that Satan has power. God is, the only power Satan has been given to him by God. Now, but he does have power, And not all miracles that you see are miracles done by God. Satan has power, but he has limited power. We know he has power to perform miracles because Jesus himself told us that. In Matthew 24:24, as Jesus was getting ready to lead his disciples going to heaven, listen to what he said to his disciples. For false Christ or false messiahs will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive, if it were even the elect. False messiahs, inspired by Satan, will appear in the last days. They will do miracles, and they will try to deceive people like you and me. Next, 2 Thessalonians 2:9, written by the Apostle Paul, that talks about the works of Satan displayed in all kinds of counterfeit miracles, signs, and wonders. And the next verse says, they too are to deceive. All kinds of counterfeit miracles Satan can work. But Satan's power is limited by God. Remember, last week when we were talking about the O's, only God is omnipotent. Satan is not omnipotent. Never has been, never will be. No one else but God has all power. So Satan only has the power now that God has allowed him to have. Now, one day he won't have any power. But that, remember, 1 John 4:4 tells us, greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. The power of the Holy Spirit is greater than Satan's power is. Never forget that. But also remember that Satan does have power today, and some miracles are not from God. That's why the Bible tells us to test the spirits to see if they are of God. And if they are of God, then they will be according to Scripture. Okay, we just have to explain that because we're going to find out as we go through these first couple of miracles that Satan has power to reproduce those miracles. Now, as we go through these 10 plagues, I want you to notice that God confronts Satan and his power and the gods of Egypt. And when we finish, we see that Creator God is the one true God. We will see as we go through. Remember that Egyptians thought that their Pharaoh was a god, and we'll see his impotence against the true God. And we also see that these 10 plagues ended in the death of the heir to their God, the son of the Pharaoh, who was the firstborn, who died in the 10th plague. God said, then they will know that I am the Lord. I want you to say that with me. The reason, I want you to remember, that's the purpose here. Then they will know that I am the Lord. That's God's purpose. Okay, so God wants to show the Egyptians that he is the Lord. So the first plague that it happens to the river Nile. Like it says, Egypt is the Nile is Egypt. Egypt was completely dependent upon the Nile for the floods that came every season. And if they flooded, they brought fertile soil and deposited it in the delta there. They were dependent upon it for transportation, for agriculture. They were dependent upon their industry, the shipbuilding. Egypt revolved around the Nile. Had the Nile not been in Egypt, Egypt would have been such a dry desert that people couldn't have lived there. But because of the Nile, they were able to. And so they worshipped the god of the Nile, and they believed that their most powerful god, they believed that the Nile was his bloodstream. So what did God do? He turned the Nile to blood. Now, for 7 days, They could not drink the water. They could not use the water. The fish, whatever was in there, died. It smelled bad. God showed them, the Nile is not your God. Your gods cannot stand up to creator God. They thought the God of the Nile had created them. I said, no. I am creator God. I am the Lord. Now, the Egyptian wise men could also turn water into blood. The difference is they couldn't turn it back to water. God did that. Now, was it actual blood like we have running through our veins? We don't know, because Scripture isn't explicit. It calls it blood, but we don't know the actual chemical makeup of it. But we do know for sure that it was not just that the way the sun was shining on the river that it looked red. We know that because that doesn't kill fish. Sunlight is on water all the time, and all the fish don't die. It doesn't stink. All of this happens. So we know that somehow God changed the chemical makeup of this water during this time. And he did it to show them that he is the Lord. Again, don't forget that their wise men could do this. And because his wise men could do the same, Pharaoh hardened his heart and wouldn't let the people go. Now, just imagine when you have all these dead fish, then the next thing that happened is that there were frogs all over the land. Now, when we first bought our little cottage, we had lots of little toads around, and that first year our kids were 4 to 9 or 10 that first year we bought it, and they used to love catching the toads. They caught so many toads that year. The fishermen all around would pay them a nickel or a dime to use them as a bait for fishing because the kids loved catching frogs. And after that, the next several years, we didn't have any frogs. There were no frogs in our area of northern Ontario on our lake, and I'm sure the kids caught them all that first year. Well, that did not happen here. There were so many that there were frogs everywhere, in your bed, in your kitchen, in all your, you go to make something and there would be your bread, there would be frogs in your kneading trough. Everywhere you went, there were frogs. Now, normally, the Egyptians liked frogs. You know why? They actually had a god that they, of the frog. Because normally, when the Nile receded, then there would be frogs left along the shoreline, and that reminded them, when they heard the frogs, that reminded them that the gods who were in charge of the Nile had done their work. They had deposited the fertile soil in the delta there, and now the frogs were letting them know that this work of the gods had been done. The God said, "You like frogs? I'll give you frogs." Frogs were everywhere till they couldn't wait for the frogs to be taken away. Then, and of course, then, the Egyptian magicians could also do this. But the funny thing is, they couldn't get rid of the frogs. So why in the world Pharaoh would want them to make more frogs that they couldn't get rid of, I don't know. But he did. But God got rid of the frogs. You know what happened? Pharaoh hardened his heart, no, the people can't go. So God sent gnats. Now, the NIV calls them gnats. We don't know if they were gnats or mosquitoes or lice. I never knew till I moved to Canada about black flies. There was some nuisance of a little bug, whatever they were. But this time, the Egyptian magicians could not reproduce them. This time, only God. Remember I told you Satan has power, but it's limited. I said, okay, enough. From now on, only God can perform the miracles. But they were obviously a nuisance. I don't know if lice ever went around your school when your children went, but I know it's a lot of work to get rid of lice, and I know that they're very uncomfortable. But I know far more about mosquitoes than I know about lice. In our little cottage, you have to be careful when you go. You have to plan your time. It's in northern Ontario. You have to be careful when you go on the first holiday of the spring, which is the Queen's birthday on May 24th. You have to be careful if you go that weekend, because that's when the black flies are out. Now, we hadn't heard of black flies before coming from the south. We didn't know what they were, and we went up there the first few times, and they didn't bother us when we were there. And then one time, we went up there, and my little daughter, my youngest one, came back with blood all the way in her part from bites from the black flies. Any skin that was exposed got bitten. That's a real nuisance when you have bloody bites from insects. And then you have to be careful. You can't go up in. You have to be careful in June and July because the mosquitoes are out. And so mosquitoes, they love me, they find me, and I get lots of bites from mosquitoes. Then, in August, it's pretty bug-free, except for the next one, flies. And there aren't that many flies, but they're those, they call them deer flies, and they bite. They take humps out of you. So when you're in the water, you have to go under the water if you see one, because if you don't, you will know that a dog flies around. Well, after the gnats or lice or whatever they were went away, then the flies came in. Now, do you remember those little round things we used to have that caught flies? Remember what a nuisance they were? I don't know about you, but I hate flies. So if the flies are out, I am constant. You can find me with a fly swatter in my hand, chasing flies constantly. Now, I never kill them. I just try to kill them. Because I'm too impatient. As soon as I see one, I got that fly swatter down. Ron can take aim. He can kill the fly. I just run around, like I said, with a chicken with my head cut off, trying to kill flies because I hate them so much. Well, I can't even imagine what it must have been like for them to have so many flies everywhere. They didn't have the little round things that hung down from the ceiling, and they were a terrible nuisance for the people. And, of course, flies can bring disease. They're not a good thing to have around. Pharaoh noticed that when the flies came, there was a big difference here. The flies were in all the homes and around all the animals of the Egyptians, but they were not where the Israelites lived in Goshen. At this point, God makes a distinction. Only the Egyptians will be bothered by the plague from now on. Israelites are spared because the God of Israel wants everyone to know, I am the Lord. Well, evidently the flies did bring disease. They could have brought something, I don't know, like anthrax, because the next plague is that there was a terrible disease on all the livestock. Their livestock was dropping dead. And again, did not happen in Israel. After that, the next one was boils on men and animals. I don't know if you've ever had a boil, but I hear they're very painful. And they were evidently covered with them so much so that the religious wise men could not even come to Pharaoh because they were in so much pain because of all the boils that they had. And the next one was hail, a hailstorm that was the mother of all hailstorms. They had never before since had a hailstorm that was as bad as this one. It struck everything in the fields, men, animals, crops, everything that was in the field. Those who obeyed God and took their animals in were unaffected. Then, after that, it was taken away. It was hard. And the next plague that God sent was locusts. Now, locusts can be a really bad plague. I grew up in Oklahoma, and I have heard stories of the Dust Bowl, and in those years it was so hard for farmers to produce anything because of the lack of rain. What they did produce, locusts came in and got rid of that. Here, then these locusts, this was the worst form of locust the Bible tells us it has ever been. Now, they say that in 1 square mile, a swarm of locusts can be between 100 million and 200 million locusts in 1 square mile. Okay, we're not talking 1 square mile. We're talking Egypt. Covered with locusts. What was left by the hail completely destroyed. The crops were destroyed by the locust. Trees. The locust ate everything that could be eaten. Again, Pharaoh hardened his heart against God. So the next one that God sent was darkness. Darkness that was so dark it could be felt. I don't think those of us in Tucson can understand that kind of darkness because we always have such beautiful nights here, and especially the full moon that we've been having. We go out and it'd be almost bright as day in the last couple of days. But the stars are always so beautiful. We can't understand this kind of darkness, but we can appreciate how much they love sunlight. When I was away at Christmas time at Pittsburgh, and I was in Birmingham and Pittsburgh, they both had rain almost every day. Oh my, I both missed the sunshine so much. And Egypt's main god, one of their main gods was the god Ra, and he was the god of the sun. And so God was showing here, God said he will just show who the gods of Egypt are, and he's showing the sun god. I am the true God. And so that the sun god was powerless against Creator God. Also remember, Pharaoh was a representation of his God. So not only did the people realize that their sun god was powerless, but also their Pharaoh was powerless against Creator God. I want you to think for just a minute what it must have been like for these people. These people who worshipped, whose religion was very important to them. We can tell this by all the temples. Those of you who have been to Egypt know all the temples that are there that are still standing. They took their religion seriously. Just imagine if you had been living there at that time. What would this have done to the morale of the Egyptians?
What do you know what the time frame was of each one of these plagues?
Okay, so the scripture tells us on some, but we think they took place over a period of 9 months, all of them together, because we can tell from that they started about July, August, because of the flooding of the Nile, and we know that they ended about March of April because of Passover, the time of the Passover. So the total time was probably about 9 months. Scripture tells us some of them how long each one lasted, but altogether, that's how long. So just imagine if you've gone through 9 months of this kind of activity, how would it have affected? How would it have affected all these people who thought these were their gods? Would not even question. I can't help but believe because God wanted everyone to know that He is the Lord. I can't help but believe there were some people who did realize, my gods are worthless. This God must be the true God. And these Egyptians who had been the oppressors now realize that they are the ones who are being oppressed, and they are being oppressed by God and their slaves. Was that humiliating? Now realize that your slave's God. I think my tape came undone. Sorry about that. I had it taped in 3 different places. I thought it would hold, but I think it didn't. Sorry. Anyway, can you imagine how they felt, how humiliating it must have been to have had these slaves whom they had worked to death, and now those who had oppressed are now being oppressed by the God of those very slaves. Then they will know that I am the Lord. And then we come to number 10. God said, I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. And now He brings the greatest judgment of all. You know the story, and we will go into Passover itself more when we get into Leviticus and we study the Feast of Israel. We'll just go over it briefly today. God said to His people, He said, okay, they haven't listened to me this play, after this play, they will listen to me. In fact, Pharaoh said to Moses, don't you ever come before me again. If you ever come before me again, you will die. And Moses said, okay, you will never see my face again. And so God told Moses to tell the people to take a lamb. It had to be a lamb that was a year old. It had to be a perfect lamb. Nothing to be wrong with it. It had to be completely without blemish. They were to keep it 4 days to prepare it. And then on the 14th day of the month, they were to take a precious little lamb, and they were to kill it. And they were to take the blood of the lamb with what was their paintbrush, some hyssop that grows in Israel. They were to take it and take the blood and paint the blood on the doorpost and over the top of their home, on the sides and the top. Then they were to take the meat of the lamb and to roast it on fire, and they were to eat it together along with some other items I told them. And as they ate, they were to have their coat tucked into their bed, ready to go, because God said, tonight you will go. Because tonight, that night, the angel of death would pass throughout all of Egypt, and everyone who did not have the blood, had not obeyed, and had the blood on their doors, all of the firstborn in that household would die, from the owners to the slaves and the livestock as well. Any firstborn would die. But those who believed God and obeyed and had applied the blood were passed over. Their firstborn were not killed. Nothing in their house was killed. Why? They believed God and applied the blood. God was teaching them a very important lesson. They were not yet a nation. They were an oppressed people who were being delivered. God was ready to form them into a nation. We'll see in the rest of Exodus how he formed them into a nation. But as he did, he was basing this nation on the idea that the blood of a substitute can forgive your sin. Their nation was built on the blood of a substitute, that as we look in faith, the sins are forgiven. So that night, in the middle of the night, there was great moaning and wailing throughout all of Egypt, the Bible tells us, because they all realized they had lost their firstborn sons. Even Pharaoh, who believed in that line that I gave you last week in the 18th dynasty was right. The second son was not his firstborn. Why? He died the night of the Passover, because the angel of death did not pass over his home. He did not have the blood of the substitute lamb there. And so that night, Pharaoh said, leave, get out of here, I never want to see you again. And the people, Exodus tells us that they actually put their kneading bowls on their backs, covered in their clothes, without yeast. If their bread didn't have time to run, they were ready to go. And they left and they got out of there. And God told them, I want you to celebrate this night every year at this time, as long from now on, forever, so that you remember that I passed over you and delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians. In other words, God is saying, remember what I've done for you. Don't ever forget it. I want you every year from now on to remember what I did for you. He doesn't want us to forget either. He's done so much for us. Don't ever forget. And then the amazing thing for us, we know, before we go to finish the story this week, we know that this was a picture, a foreshadowing. Remember, the Old Testament tells us a great deal about Jesus before Jesus ever came. Why? So when he came, his people would recognize him. And God established this most important principle here, that the blood of substitute can bring forgiveness so that we don't receive the penalty we deserve. Those who had the blood on their doorposts, the blood of an innocent lamb, those who had it, the life of their firstborn was spared. And we know that Jesus died on the night of Passover. After he had been with his disciples, Passover, as they were giving the sacrificing the Passover lamb, the Lamb of God was sacrificed as our substitute. For these 1,500 years before he came, God was saying, the blood of a substitute, the blood of a substitute, the blood of a substitute. Jesus is our substitute lamb. Because he died on that cross for us and gave his blood. We don't have to take the punishment our sins deserve. And he showed them right here as he was making this sin, forging their nation. That was the first lesson he taught them. The blood of a substitute. Now, if you've ever read the New Testament, you know John 1 says, the very first chapter of John, it's a good story from a completely different perspective. And it says, he came that which was his own, yet his own did not receive him. But to all who believe on his name, he gave the right to become children of God. So when Israel rejected their substitute whom they should have known, for 1,500 years they've been reminding themselves that there would be a substitute given for them, but they didn't. But because they did, that opened the door for those of us who are not Jewish, for us to believe. And so they were here today because they rejected. And God opened the door for us, because we've studied more about the Bible, more of what's going to happen. His people are going to back to him. And they're going to look on him whom they have pierced, and they will know him. And they will believe. But remember this, the blood of a substitute. That's why Jesus' blood forgives our sin. Then, after they left Egypt hurriedly that night, God sent them away. He had his plan to deliver them. He didn't send them up. Remember, the Nile Delta is right on the coast up there, and then the Nile comes down. And then God didn't send them by the most logical route, which would have been a long coastline, because he was sending them to Canaan right over here, which is also along the coast. But he didn't send them along the coast. And the reason the Bible tells us he didn't is because the Philistines lived along the coast in Canaan. And they were very young people who were afraid. He was afraid they would get attacked, they would be frightened, they would turn away and quit. So God instead sent them down a southern route, much longer, into the Sinai Peninsula. He sent them down that way. Sinai is going to come to this story next week, as you know. And so he sent them down that way. And it happened when he sent them that way, is Pharaoh thought, oh, they've gotten confused. And he said, what have I done? I have just let 600,000 of my slaves free, 2 million total. What have I done here? So he would go after them. So he got all of his 600 of his best chariots, he got everybody together, and he said, we're going to go get them because they're confused. They were camping out, and God was leading them by a pillar of cloud by day, that was in fire by night. Now think, they were in the desert.
Why did they need to see at night? They were traveling at night. It was cool at night. In the desert, you don't travel in the heat of the day. But they were traveling. It's dark early now. And so they were probably traveling when it was dark. God was showing them, my presence is with you. I'm right here. I'm right here. You don't have to worry. You don't have to be afraid. Just, I'm here. I will lead. I will help you. I will be your God. And he left him. God did. But then one day they looked up, and who did they see? Pharaoh coming after them, and the Bible says they were terrified. You can imagine how terrified they were. And so I want us to look right at the scripture here because it has some really good things for us. In chapter 14, verses 17 and 18. Chapter 14. Do you remember there were lots of graves in Egypt? Graves were an important part of Egypt. Any of you have seen kids know they buried their kings in these huge tombs. There were lots of tombs in Egypt. Really being sarcastic to Moses. Well, there's not enough graves there. You brought us out here. We're going to die. We're going to die here in the desert. We'd rather go back to Egypt and live than be here and die. Yesterday, as one of the ladies was doing her soap, I thought she had a very good point. She said, they would rather go back to Egypt and be slaves than trust God. That is a pretty good way to put it. Got my attention. Remember how bad life was for them? The bitter bondage they were under? Now they're scared to death for their lives, and they would rather go back to that than to trust God to take care of them. And He's leading them by day and by night. Of course He's going to take care of them. So, and they say, we'd rather be back there and be alive than the desert did. And then in verse 13, Moses answered, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Don't worry. Stand still. You don't have to do anything. God's going to take care of you. And you all know the story. They got to the water. The Red Sea. It probably is really more Dead Sea. You don't know exactly where it is. You never find out. But God parted the waters of the sea by a strong wind so that the Israelites could through the night with a wall of water on their right, a wall of water on their left, and dry underneath them, and God won the victory that day. Then the Egyptians followed, of course, behind them, and as they were in the sea, God sent an opposite direction wind, and water, because evidently their wheels started coming off and breaking, and the water came in over them, and all of the Egyptian army perished that night. God said, I don't have to worry, I'm going to take care of it. That reminds me of a time later in the Israel's history when they were facing something similar with another king in another country. And one of their psalmists wrote Psalm 46 that says, God is refuge and strength and ever-present in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. God is our refuge and ever-present help in trouble. He is for us today, after that He was for His people today. You know, I read this verse especially because on 9/11 we were living in Canada, but we were concerned for the United States and what was going on. And so Ron called us together in our church that night, and we got together to pray for the United States, Canadians, French, Americans. And a Dutch lady got up that night. We had people who came up and prayed and read scripture and that kind of thing. And she said these verses from Psalm 46. was that the Dutch people did a bit about difficult times because they were in the occupation of World War II. They had gone through a lot of suffering, and we had a lot of ethnic church from different parts of the world, and a lot of people who had suffered a great deal during that time. And he said that verse that night. It was especially meaningful to me. God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. He always is. No matter what happens, he was then, he today. He always will be your refuge, your strength, and ever-present help in trouble. Stand firm. Don't be afraid. Stand firm. God will fight for us. The Egyptians said in that chapter 14, what's going on here? Let's get out of here. God is fighting against the Egyptians. God is our refuge and strength. Stand firm.